From May to November 1931, the International Colonial Exhibition was held in Paris. Almost 8 million people attended to admire the riches of colonized lands. At the time, the French Empire was at its peak of power. Present on every continent, it stretched across 12 million square kilometers and counted almost 100 million inhabitants. Andrée Greffrath wouldn't have missed it for the world. For years, this 30-year-old mechanic had nurtured a dream: to move to Senegal with his wife and daughter. 4 years later, in 1935, his dream came true. He and his family set sail for Dakar on board the Foucault. They would remain there for almost 30 years. Their photo album shows the intimacy of a family living in colonial France as it was beginning to show the cracks. More than 3,800 photos. Snapshots of life commented by Andrée, the Greffrath's daughter.
Dolphins joined us off Gibraltar. I screamed at Dad to shoot them with his camera. The sight raised Mom's morale a little. 6 days since we'd sailed from Marseille. 6 days of seasickness. Plus, she gradually realized she wouldn't be seeing her parents for quite some time. Dad agreed to lend me his camera. He couldn't refuse me anything. He posed with Mom. I slipped and pressed the button. The photo was ruined, and I sulked. I thought of all the stories I'd been told about Senegal, the cannibals, the wild beasts. Maybe Mom was right. We weren't that badly off in France after all. Two weeks since our arrival in Dakar, I wasn't allowed outdoors without a stupid hat on my head. I thought it made me look ugly, but there was no negotiating. With my cat Blanchette for company, I dug deep in my imagination so I didn't die of boredom. A cat, some chicks, and a rabbit cage. Not exactly exotic. Where were the cannibals and wild beasts? Dad photographed me non-stop. In every photo, I'm the model little girl, the center of the world, the center of everyone's attention. Dad's mind was always wandering. I think he was trying to create, in that savage land, the ideal family, in which Mom often found it hard to have a place. He quarreled with her so I would be named Andrée, like him. I soon understood I'd never have a brother or sister, that I'd have to make do on my own. One day, on returning from the beach, I had a bad case of sunstroke. I collapsed onto my bed in a feverish sweat. I dreamed that Blanchette had turned into a lion. She wanted to eat everybody, and there was no way of stopping her. On the rare occasions I did go out, it was to see Dad at work. He didn't have such a fine garage in Paris, with this many men under his command, young guys whom Dad took under his wing. He'd spend hours teaching them mechanics. In Dakar, he was someone of importance.
Andrée Greffrath became the official chauffeur of colonial governors and civil servants. Back then, Dakar was the capital of French West Africa, and its port was the region's economic hub. Most colonists worked in the administrations, smaller copies of those in mainland France. Justice, politics, and the economy were overseen by the Ministry of the Colonies. The only Africans with official roles were tribal and village chiefs, who were charged with applying laws imposed by the French. To justify its political dominion, France tasked itself with civilizing wild, sparsely populated regions of Africa. It had to go black, as the colonial expression went. In other words, create infrastructures to ensure the education and health of the African laborer.
Mom wanted to feel useful here, so she found herself a job as a nursing assistant at Dakar Hospital. Health and hygiene became her calling in life. It was bound to happen. Blanchette climbed the wall and escaped, never to return. To console me, Dad bought me a fawn. We called it Bichette. I was the only one allowed to pet her. At home, I felt like a princess. We even had servants who took care of everything. This day was Tabaski, the Eid holiday. I begged Dad to let me photograph Mustafa. I didn't have a clue about what this traditional feast day entailed. My stomach turned when he grabbed a goat and slit its throat in the yard. Mustafa explained that for Muslims, it was a sacrifice to the Prophet Ibrahim. When white people were around, Mustafa wasn't the same. Standing to attention, he was ill at ease in front of the camera. I think he only agreed to be photographed to please Dad.
Like all colonized people, Mustafa was subject to the Indigenous Peoples Code. Established in 1881, this set of laws and regulations deprived Africans of their political rights and basic freedoms, such as protesting and freedom of movement after dark. Indigenous people were also subjected to forced labor. Although slavery had officially been abolished, only 2% of French African laborers were paid. Requisitioned by force, they were often mistreated, underfed, and sometimes beaten. Revolts were few and far between. Laborers preferred to flee to neighboring British or Portuguese colonies.
Our neighbor owned a large farm. His name was Oscar, and like Dad, he was a big fan of photography. On this day, he was intent on showing off his new recruit, Cissé, who could climb trees without a ladder to pick coconuts. In the blink of an eye, Cissé was already at the top. July 14th, Bastille Day. It was scorching hot. Oscar accompanied us with his son. Mustafa wore traditional dress to celebrate French liberty, equality, and fraternity. But he was refused a place on the bleachers. Blacks and whites didn't mix, not even on the national holiday. They were just given the day off to have fun, while we whites looked on and took photos. I don't know if they were really enjoying themselves or just putting on a show for our entertainment. It was only on the athletics field that Africans and Europeans stood as equals. But nonetheless, as rivals, as competitors, to see who was the strongest or fastest.
1936. The Olympic Games in Berlin. The Black American athlete Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals. An affront for Adolf Hitler. As chancellor since 1933, Hitler advocated the purity of the Aryan race and its superiority above all others. In the 1930s, Europe was poisoned by racist policies. This allowed the colonial regimes to justify the black man's submission to the white man.
Dad had promised me. We finally left the tarmac roads of Dakar for the dust tracks of the bush. We were off to see the savannah and its wild beasts. Mustafa drove like a madman. But we still had another 7 hours on the bumpy track before reaching his village. When we arrived, we were greeted like royalty. People kept touching us, as if we were the first whites they had ever seen. Mustafa was proud to introduce us to his parents, brothers, and sisters. I couldn't remember who was who. Dad was seen as their benefactor. Mom was dragged off by a group of women, and there she was pounding millet. Nobody dared tell her she was hopeless at it. Everybody was surprised to learn that Dad only had one wife and daughter. The kids kept staring at me. They waved me over, but I didn't dare get too close. They were half naked, but I was the one who felt ill at ease. I was dying to cool off, but I didn't bathe with them in the river. Then came the rainy season. We stayed stuck in our tents. Two days later, we finally crossed the river Niger. Mom turned as white as a sheet when Mustafa told her it was infested with crocodiles. On the other bank, we met up with a group of hunters armed to the teeth. Dad's dream was to present Mom with a pair of elephant tusks. He spoke of nothing else for days. He let me hold his rifle while he took a photo. We headed into the undergrowth. The slightest crack of a twig made me jump. My heart was beating like a drum, and in the heat, my mind started playing tricks again. We were surely being tracked by wild beasts. A gunshot. Then a second brought me back to my senses. Dad was screaming at me, "Quick, take some photos!" I took a step back, half proud to see Dad standing there like the Lord of the Jungle, half disgusted on seeing that poor animal dead on the ground. "4 years since we had left France. I liked less and less being photographed. I had grown up. Bichette, too. I didn't want her confined to the hen pen, but Bichette couldn't stop bullying our dog. It's the law of the jungle, Dad said. You have to protect the weak from the strong. Mustafa was still with us. As always, he was just as shy about having his picture taken. As for Mom, she was more and more homesick. 4 years without hugging her parents. 4 years of dreaming of seeing Paris again. What had been going on there all these years?
In 1938, the Greffrath family arrived in France to spend a one-month vacation. The country was in the throes of a political and social upheaval. After 2 years in power and unable to lead France out of an economic crisis, Léon Blum resigned. The Popular Front experiment came to an end. Workers in mainland France now benefited from a paid vacation and a 40-hour working week. But nothing had changed in the colonies. African workers remained subjected to the Indigenous Peoples Code and forced labor. The Popular Front had turned a deaf ear to calls for increased rights.
On the trip, Mom didn't stop talking about her parents. I understood how much she had missed them when I saw her take them into her arms for a long moment. She kept asking Dad to take photos, as if she wanted to make up for lost time or to forge new memories. Who are these people? Uncles? Aunts? Cousins? I barely know them. I was bored. I caught Mom vaunting our life in Dakar. Everyone listened intently to tales of our safaris and how Mustafa was always there, ready to serve. As for Dad, he still felt awkward in France, and even more so with Mom's family. One morning, he had us jump in the car and sped off. He wanted to show me what France looked like. It was the first time I had seen mountains. Everyone spoke of the war that would soon break out in Europe. I wanted to go back to Dakar, and so did Mom.
In 1939, France went to war against Nazi Germany. Troops from the colonies were sent to the front line, and the Senegalese skirmishers were the first to fall under enemy shells. During the fall of France in 1940, thousands of them were taken as prisoners of war. Considered subhuman by the Nazis, they were separated from white prisoners. They were sometimes released, then hunted and shot down like wild game.
France was occupied by the German army for 4 years. Mustafa had no choice, and nobody asked his opinion. He was conscripted into B Army, dispatched to reconquer France. Dad wanted to capture the moment for posterity. He took Mustafa's identity photo and sent a copy to his family. Mustafa hated goodbyes. He vanished with the hundreds of soldiers sent to Europe from all over Africa. I shut myself away and cried for a while. Mustafa had gone to war to liberate France, he who hated guns. Freedom. I now had a bicycle to go all over Dakar. Mom gave it to me as a 17th birthday gift, along with a crocodile skin purse. Dad bequeathed me his camera for good. I was growing up fast, but I was still his darling daughter. I ended up making a few friends. White kids who shared the same childhood memories, who had known the same loneliness, and who had a Mustafa to serve them. For a few months, my mind was elsewhere. Up in the clouds, Dad said. It took him a year to accept that I'd fallen in love with Raymond, a teacher on Gorée Island. Dad refused to see me grow up, and refused to see himself growing old. And soon, he'd be a grandfather.
In 1944. In liberated cities, crowds cheered the soldiers of the colonial regiments. The Senegalese skirmishers had joined the French First Army to free France from Nazi occupation. Once demobilized, the colonial troops were sent back to Africa. On their arrival, they discovered that their war pensions were lower than those of soldiers in mainland France. In December 1944, at the Tiaroua Army camp in Dakar, the Senegalese skirmishers demanded to be paid the difference. Between 35 and 70 of them were shot dead during the night by French gendarmes. On May 8, 1945, in Sétif in Algeria, 10,000 people marched with placards reading, "Long live free and independent Algeria." Riots broke out. The French army stepped in. The repression was bloody. It is believed that between 20 and 45,000 Algerians were massacred.
In 1952, Mustafa wrote to us and sent a few photos of himself. Wounded in battle, he had settled in Paris. With Dad's help, he found a job in a garage. Paris, February 19th, 1952. Dear Greffrath, I don't know when I'll be back. As our saying goes, the bird who is free to fly wants to see the world before flying home. How is Claude, Andrée and Raymond's son? When my son was born, Dad took up photography again. Childhood memories came back to me. The garden, Blanchette the cat, our servants. History was repeating itself. Everything seemed set in stone, but only in appearance. I watched Dad through his lens, and for the first time, thought he may have been wrong. Perhaps the Africa he dreamed of didn't exist. He had trapped us inside a bubble all these years, a magnificent bubble that was just waiting to burst.
In 1960. As France was embroiled in the Algerian War, the vast majority of African countries went from being colonies to independent states. The French Empire was no more.
We left Dakar in 1963 for good. We left Raymond behind. We had divorced. I arrived in Paris with snow on the ground. It felt weird. And then Mom died. Dad tried to live a quiet life as a retiree, but he couldn't sit still. The moment he could, he went on his travels. My son and I followed along to the four corners of the earth on his perpetual quest for a lost paradise.